Good morning. Welcome to Corinth Community Church. We're so excited that you've joined us today. Why don't you stand and join us in some worship?
Lift up your gaze, be lifted up. Tell everyone how great the love come down from heaven's gate to kiss the earth with hope and grace. Sing, who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. Lift up your hands, be lifted up. Let the redeemed declare the love. And we bow down at heaven's gate to kiss the feet of hope and grace. Sing, who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. There is one God, He is holy. There is one Lord over everything. There is one King, He is Jesus, King of glory, strong and mighty. There is one God, He is holy. There is one Lord over everything. There is one King, He is Jesus, King of glory, strong and mighty. You are the King of glory, the Lord strong and mighty. You are the King of glory, the Lord strong and mighty. Lift up your gaze. Lift up your gaze, be lifted up. Tell everyone how great the love come down from heaven's gate to kiss the earth with hope and grace. Sing, who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. Lift up your hands, be lifted up. Let the redeemed declare the love. And we bow down at heaven's gate to kiss the feet of hope and grace. Sing, who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. There is one God, He is holy. There is one Lord over everything. There is one King, He is Jesus, King of glory, strong and mighty. There is one God, He is holy. There is one Lord over everything. There is one King, He is Jesus, King of glory, strong and mighty. And you are the King of glory, the strong and mighty. You are the King of glory. The Lord strong and mighty. You are the King of glory. The Lord strong and mighty. You spread out the skies over empty space and said, let there be light. Into a dark and formless world your light was born. And you spread out your arms over empty hearts, said, let there be light. Into a dark and hopeless world your son was born. You made the world and saw that it was good. You sent your only son, for you are good. What a wonderful maker. What a wonderful Savior. How majestic your whispers. How humble your love. With a strength like no other. And the heart of a father. How majestic your whispers. What a wonderful God. Your eyes full of sea. How beautiful the cross. And we have only heard the faintest whispers of how great you are. You made the world and saw that it was good. You sent your only son, for you are good. What a wonderful maker. What a wonderful Savior. And how majestic your whispers. And how humble your love. And with a strength like no other. And the heart of a father. How majestic your whispers. What a wonderful God. You made the world. You made the world and saw that it was good. You sent your only son, for you are good. You made the world. You made the world and saw that it was good. You sent your only wonderful Savior. How majestic your whisper. How humble your love. And with a strength like no other. And the heart of a father. How majestic your whisper. What a wonderful God. And how majestic your whispers. What a wonderful God.
Welcome back. We're continuing our Bounce series today, and today's message it's really interesting because every time I talk on this, people really get engaged. There's something in us, it's like an adrenaline rush when we talk about this topic that helps us or makes us feel morally superior. And I want to tell you today that we're going to address this as humbly as we can, because sometimes the people we're going to be describing are ourselves. And so I'm sure as you're listening to this message, people are going to come to your mind. You go, oh yeah, this person's this way or this person's that way. And I want you to know that sometimes that person's you. And we're not going to be putting anybody above anybody else, but we are going to talk about dealing with difficult people, or particularly resentful people. Resentful people are those people in our lives that seem to bring the temperature up every time they enter the room. A great quote I heard is that some people, when they enter the room, they bring sunshine and joy. Some people do it when they leave the room. And we want to make sure that we're good, grateful people, as Scotty was talking about, or Scotty will be talking about next week. So I want to share some of these things with you and work it through. So this message is for you to both help deal with difficult people and to also understand when the difficult person is you, a way out, okay? And so this is going to be a challenge for a lot of us, but I think it's absolutely essential that we address these things. Sometimes we go through the world and we like to think that everybody is kind and good and wants to do the right thing. But the truth of the matter is you probably weren't very old when you discovered that some people don't like doing the right thing. Some people like doing the wrong thing, and other people aren't there for other people's best interests. There are evil people in the world. And while I'd like to hope everyone can be redeemed, and that's part of being a follower of Christ, is recognizing that no matter how far someone goes, they can come back to God in an instant, in a heart change. But we're going to talk about people that insist on going a certain way and how that affects us. Now, one of the books I love to read in the Old Testament is the book of Proverbs. This is an interesting history. There is a section of the Bible, actually 5 books, that are called what they call wisdom literature. And in Israel around 1000 to about 800 BC, there was a real interest in the concept of wisdom. In fact, some of that has been brought down that most Jews study to this day. And one of those 5 books is called the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is Jewish men would take young Jewish boys, and they would have them memorize and learn these proverbs so that when they grow into adulthood, that they would have a good, productive, virtuous life. And so there's many of these written. And one of the things about Proverbs is a form of poetry. And so there would kind of be an up and then a down. There would be a left and then a right. There would be a point and then a contrary point. And that's how poetry flowed. And so this issue of difficult people comes up quite a bit in the book of Proverbs, mostly to warn the young people about not becoming those people themselves. And so I'm going to read a few just out of one chapter of Proverbs, and these are scattered all the way through the Bible, and there are lots of instances of this. The warning that comes with each and every person and the choices we make. You can go right back to the beginning of the Bible, Cain and Abel, and in that little passage, there is more human nature and more about human nature than we could ever imagine. God said to Cain, sin is crouching at the door. It wants to have you, and you must resist it. So way back at the beginning of time, this idea of whether we are going to allow good or evil to be manifest in us was put forward. So let me read a couple of these Proverbs for you, and you can see a little bit of the theme or tone on dealing with difficult people. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Verse 11, though through the blessing of the upright a city is exalted, but by the mouth of the wicked it is destroyed. Verse 12, whoever derides their neighbor has no sense, but the one who has understanding holds their tongue. And then verse 16 and 17. A kind-hearted woman gains honor, but a ruthless man gains only wealth. Those who are kind benefit themselves, but the cruel bring ruin on themselves. And so there is, we like to think there's a justice in the world. And there really is. Although it may not be manifest in the way that we may experience in this life. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there are many times in our life where fairness will not be manifest. And this is why our upcoming messages on gratitude are so crucial, because life isn't fair. I remember there's one guy I went to school with, and he talked about his dad, and he was a really grateful, easygoing guy. And I said, where did you learn? He said, well, I learned it from my father. And he said, my father would absolutely insist that we had to be grateful for things, and if we weren't grateful, there would be a price for it. And I said, well, can you give an example? He said, yeah, if we were cutting the cake and one of us said, his piece is bigger than mine, my father would take the cake away from me and said, instead of comparing yourself, you need to understand life isn't fair. You should be grateful for what you get. And he said, just over the years, I realized that life isn't fair. And so when unfairness happens, I retort to gratefulness. And he was, like I said, a very easygoing guy that there wasn't a lot that had a hold on him. Life isn't fair. And so we're going to talk about this. Because if we insist life is fair, we will get resentful. We will get resentful. So what is a resentful person? Well, we probably all have them in our lives, and sometimes we're that person. In fact, we may be a chronic resentful person. A resentful person is someone that is perpetually in a bad mood. Now, there's a difference between what I call melancholy people and resentful people. Melancholy people are those quiet souls that live among us, that maybe the temperature is a little low with them. And by that, what I mean is they don't say a lot, and they don't get uppity. Okay, they kind of got one pace and kind of one tone, and that's how they're made up. Okay, there's nothing wrong with being melancholy. In fact, some people are born that way. It really is, and there's a lot of wisdom in melancholy people, because they might be the one person in the room that sits back and goes, "Well, wait a minute," because they kind of look at the glass being half empty. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. A resentful person is someone that has a chip on their shoulder, someone that seems to believe that whatever happens, everybody else owes them something, or something owes themselves something. They go around with this chip on the shoulder, believing that unless some external things happen, they refuse to be happy. Resentful people are also critical of everyone and everything, and hard to please. Critical people are rarely happy. They're hard to please. You may have grown up with a resentful parent who never told you, hey, good job, or whatever. Or, if you brought home a B+, why wasn't it A+, and that kind of thing. Most of us have great parents. But we all know those people that you can never please and who tend to be critical. They're the people that can just suck the air out of the room by their temperament. What else? A resentful people hate criticism and take everything personally. This is another sign of a critical person. They love to give criticism, but they are so thin-skinned that anytime a light is shown on them, they will deflect, they will object, they will stomp their feet, they will run out of the room. They'll do anything but confront the possibility that they are the problem. And so critical people tend to be really good at being critical and resentful, but very poor at taking feedback. Critical people hate feedback because they are so insecure that they can't stand the idea that maybe they've done something wrong or that they are wrong in their hearts. And so they constantly point to others and other things to try to deflect that, because to confront it themselves, they would have to realize that they aren't meeting the standard that they have set for the world. Critical people or resentful people feel freedom is doing whatever they want regardless of who gets hurt. Also, a critical person always looks at the world as rotating around them. And so, whether it is taking a bigger part of something, or whether it is cutting someone off in traffic, or whether it is tearing someone down to make themselves feel better, or gossiping about them or slandering them, the critical or resentful person sees the world as being their playground, and they see freedom as being able to do what they want without being challenged or stopped. A critical person, if you get or a resentful person between them and what they want, they fight. They will fight with you. And this brings us to the next point. Resentful people or critical people have a short fuse. It defaults to anger. Anger is their emotion of choice. And I'll go on to the next point. Resentful people use both aggressive anger and passive aggressive anger. Aggressive anger are your bullies. Your bullies that dress down others or stare them down or yell over them or shout them down. Those are bullies. Bullies are trying to impose their will on you by being overwhelming. Passive aggressive people, what they do is they try to ruin your reputation, or they communicate to you in ways that they can't feel any kind of pushback. So if someone is angry at this person, they won't talk to them about their problem. They talk to everybody else about their problems. They have reputation destruction in their minds. And that actually is one of the most horrible, hurtful things, slander. But slander runs rampant. In fact, some people think it's some sort of virtue to look at other people who are messing up and spread the news to other people. That's not virtue. That is a horrible, resentful attitude, and it is not helping you, and it's not helping those other people. Passive-aggressive people who are resentful also, they're the type that won't say anything directly to you, but will send you a long email explaining, why you're wrong and what you've done. And they'll put down at the bottom, don't reply to this email, I don't want to know. So they discard you out of hand, but at the same time, they vomit their anger all over you. That's what a passive-aggressive person will do. I'll never forget, years ago, I had a person that volunteered, and they had parents that lived out of town. And the person that volunteered, their spouse wasn't a Christian. And so the parents who lived out of town were really resentful because they got in their heads, and it was one of the weirdest things. They wanted us to, in a service, confront this husband directly in front of everybody in public and shame him. First of all, when he attended our church, which was once in a while, the guy wasn't a Christian. He didn't have any faith or anything like that. And the idea of doing something like that to someone, they somehow felt that was the good and righteous thing to do. So they used to send me these long emails. They'd send me books to read. They'd send me all kinds of stuff. And I always replied the same way. I always said, thank you for your input. I'll take it under advisement and consider it. And God bless you. It's great to hear from you. And after a while, they picked up on the hint that they weren't getting to me and that they weren't going to get what they want. So the tenor of the emails got more and more harsh until they stopped. That's what resentful people do. So let's talk about ourselves first. Help, I'm the resentful person. Do you find yourself constantly unhappy? I'm not talking about in a depressed way, but I'm talking about in a way where you feel like something's been ripped off from you. You feel like life's not fair. You know, if my friend would just do this for me, I'd be okay. Or if my boss just recognized this about me, or if my coworkers just appreciated this about me, or if I didn't have that teacher, you know, that teacher was responsible for my education failing. I'm so bad in the field of this now because of that teacher, you know, and you get this resentment. You resent your spouse, you resent your kids, you resent your grandparents, you resent your parents. You're always feeling like the reason you don't have the life you need is because of other people or other circumstances. If I didn't walk with a limp, or I hadn't got cancer, or if you know, I didn't have this tragedy happen at a certain age. Some people, something happens to them and they orient their whole lives around it and allow it to eat them alive. And they get full of poison in them. And the very thing they long for, which is connection, acceptance, love, all those kind of things, goes by the wayside because they will not let go of whatever has them. And they would rather hurt and be angry and take it out because it feels better than confronting it and letting it go. So if I'm the resentful person, what do I need to do? Well, first of all, ask yourself, how did you get this way? I want to tell you something, and this may seem surprising to you, but it's actually easier to be a resentful person than it is to be a grateful person. We default to resentment. Why? Because we can't stand the idea that we would be masters of our own fate, or that we can overcome adversity, or that we, you know, whatever happened to us can be beat and actually inverted and turned into a good thing. It's much easier to get resentful. It's much easier to depend on other people and want them to all provide a living for us and provide for us and live our lives that way. It's way easier. The hard part is going to be deciding to deal with things properly and to be a healthy, grateful, happy person. That's the hard thing. It doesn't take a brave person to live a resentful life. In fact, we would all be resentful unless we picked and worked and did what we needed to do to be grateful people. We need to ask ourselves, what am I going to do about it? I want to focus on two things, and I want to say this, and I want to say with as much love as I can. You only have one life. You only have one life. And one of the beautiful parts of my job is I often get to see people, you know, when they are young and then they get married and they have kids. And I'm also the other side with people who leave this world. And I can tell you, there's nothing more depressing than someone who is the end of their life and has wasted it on being resentful. And you may say, well, most of my life is over. I'm older, I'm retired, or I'm a senior citizen. You still have some time left to change this around. Don't cop out because you think it's too late. But you only have one life, and so make it count. Second thing is, remember, attitude is going to be a big part of this. And the third thing is we need to focus on how we talk. It's really funny because Jesus talked about this. He said, out of our hearts, you know, comes forth the evil or the fruitful, you know, the ways we attack the world and all that. It comes out of our hearts. But it's interesting because words boomerang. And so often when we say horrible, hurtful things, then a lot of times that goes back and corrupts our heart again. It makes it worse. It's really interesting because there used to be this kind of psychological babble that went out there that said, you know, when you have anger, you got to get it out. That's not true. There are times when the worst thing you could do is let that anger out. There are ways to vent. There are ways to deal with anger. Always just barfing it out is not right. Someone, a great quote, they were talking about it. They said, you know, when someone hurts you and you don't say anything, you have saved yourself from the best speech ever that would have ruined your life, right? There's something to be said for holding your tongue and processing. Words matter. Proverbs, again, this is the next chapter in that book. Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. If you can somehow focus the way you talk from tearing things down and bringing things down to lifting things up, you will be a rarity in this world and a powerful person. A powerful person. Because our world we're surrounded by things that tear us down, that make us feel inadequate or scared or depressed. And we live in a world where often others can be quite harsh. But to be able to rise above that and to be a person that observes the world around them and the people around them and knows they're precious because they're made in God's image and lifts others up around them, that is a precious gift. And we're going to talk about that in the next couple of weeks in gratitude. And the third thing, and this is really important, you need to find redemption through forgiveness. Find redemption through forgiveness. You may say, you don't understand what I've gone through, how badly I've been hurt or abused, or you don't understand what this person said to me. I am sure it's horrible. But here's the thing. I've been in this business and this life long enough where I've seen people recover from absolutely horrific circumstances to live joy-filled lives. There was an interesting interview I saw on a psychologist, and he was talking about women who had been caught in the Middle East during the ISIS stuff that was going on in that, and the women would be horribly abused there. And he says, really interesting, he had a couple of patients, and he said he had one that came back and just couldn't come out of her shell. She had just gone through stuff so horrible in that, and she it seemed like nothing could help her. And he said he had another one come back, and she said she managed to deal with it and talk it out and work with it, and she was happily married and had kids and did all these kind of things. And he said the really interesting thing is they both had exact same circumstances, but for whatever reason, one of them overcame and the other didn't believe they could. Now you may say, well, maybe they had a more outgoing, gregarious personality or something like that, but I think there's more to it. Years ago, there was a movie that won an Oscar, a short movie called As We Forgive. And it was talking about the genocide in Rwanda. And Rwanda, basically, you had two major groups of people in Rwanda. And the government, the Belgian government that ruled them for a while, made the horrible decision to place one group, a smaller group, in charge of the larger group. And these people that coexisted and got along pretty well, all of a sudden there was this resentment which was grown over generations in these people. And so there was the country fell apart, and the Hutus, the people who were the larger population, went out and slaughtered the Tutsis, who were the smaller population that had been placed over them earlier on, and murdered 1 million people in a matter of about a month. With machetes, beatings, burnings, all these kind of things. As We Forgive is a story of that country years later where they had to bring people together who had lived in the same city, and one had killed the relatives of the other, and how they dealt with it. And that whole country went through this process of forgiveness and confrontation and release. And it's one of the most beautiful, powerful, painful movies I've ever seen. And after seeing it, this message comes through clear to me. If they can forgive that, then there isn't anything that's been done to me that I can't forgive. The question is if you're a resentful person, is that really one you want to spend the rest of your life? If someone set out to ruin your life, do you really want them to let them have their way? Do you want to continue for them to have a hold over you for your whole life? No. And you can overcome this. You can see through it. It may take counseling, it may take years, it may take a lot of tears, it may take screaming at the sky and asking God why and all those kind of things, but don't settle for where you are. Millions and billions of human beings have gone through similar circumstances, and many have come back. and have built beautiful, fruitful, productive lives. So let's talk about what else that is that. So find redemption through forgiveness. Next thing, stop blaming others. Nobody, including God, owes you a thing. This is a hard one to swallow. I as a minister, I sit down with people and they say, well, I would serve God, but I'd never believe a God that let my grandma die. And funny things come into my head when people say that. I was like, oh, so you wanted your grandma to be the only human being in all of universe ever not to die? Like, what kind of expectation is that to place on God? 1 out of 1 people die. Why are you so resentful for that? And then I've learned that this is just, it allows this person to take themselves off the hook and go, I'm going to live like there's no God. I'm just going to do whatever I want because I feel like God owed me and God should have let this happen. When I was 15 years old, my father died suddenly of a massive heart attack. He was only 48 years old. I remember sitting in the driveway with my mother the time she told me. I'd just come back from a camp. And I remember going downstairs, and the first thing I did is I kneeled by my bed. And I said, God, I don't know why. I don't know how we're going to do this, but I pick you. I am not going to allow this to come between you and I need you desperately. Probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. Because although it was painful, I mean, years and years of pain of having lost my dad, who was really my best friend, to where helpful and healing and all that I see that the person I am today that was partially shaped by that pain and has allowed me to be able to impart beautiful things to people's lives. God does not owe me. The only thing you owe is to yourself. To yourself, to take this life and to do what you can with it, with what's been given to you. We have a choice. We have a choice. The third thing, receive grace and mercy. Receive grace and mercy. Life isn't fair, but God is good. In fact, the audacity of how good God is to us is mind-blowing when we think about it. God doesn't owe us anything. In fact, most of humanity likes to live like he's not even there. But the truth of the matter is, and I've looked at this from every level, scientific, epistemology, philosophically, rationally, all these kind of things. I am convinced there is a God and that he is good and that he cares about me. And do you know what? Receiving that grace and mercy helps me to be free of the responsibility or the burden of resentment. Because I have someone to turn to and I have someone I believe in that thinks and believes that I can be more than I am and that I am worth something. So what do I do with a resentful person in my life? What do I do? Let's say I'm married to someone or someone's in my family or I got a coworker or whatever and they're making you miserable. How do we deal with a resentful person? What do you do if you've got one of these people in your life? Well, first of all, you can't kill them. That's illegal. Okay, let's just get that straight. I'm not going to advocate murder, maiming, torture, or anything like that, although there will be days, I know, where visuals will come to your mind and it will be very tempting and all that kind of stuff. Just push that aside, okay? Second thing is you can't run away from them. The truth of the matter is, yeah, occasionally you can change a job or you can, change your circumstances and avoid some resentful people, and I recommend the ones you can avoid, do avoid. But chances are you're going to have people who either through different seasons in their life or have their default resentment who are going to be a part of your life. And you know what? If I recognize one thing in our world right now, these people have been given a megaphone in our world. And resentment seems to be like a faddish thing right now. The more resentful, the more hurt or like a victim I am will give me the righteous right to tear others down. You don't want to be that. And you don't want to live with that. In fact, resentful people are lonely people. They really are. So what do I do? First of all, you have to decide what kind of person you're going to be. And remember that hurt people hurt people. It may not make you feel better about this, but this person that is resentful is not better than you. They're not greater than you. They are someone in need of help. And they may not accept that help, and they may be resentful and angry their whole lives. You can't necessarily change that. But what you can do is at least have a bit of understanding and go, okay, they didn't want to be this way. Nobody gives birth to a baby and says, I want them to grow up be a resentful, angry person. Nobody wants that. But somehow they've gotten this way, and somehow they somehow default to this. And I'm going to choose to love this person anyways. I'm going to choose to value this person, but I am not going to be a floor mat for this person. So how do we do that? You got to decide what kind of person you're going to be. If you want to be a grateful person, be a grateful person. You know, they may mock you and snarl at you and all those kind of things. They can't change your attitude. Only you can do that. Don't give people power over you. Because if you do, you're going to live a long, miserable, horrible life. There will always be those who want to tear down. I knew of a pastor, I'd heard them talk about this one time, and he had a hobby. He was sailing, and he loved to sail. And he saileth. And he used to do this on weekends and stuff. And someone came up to him at his church, and they said, we got to stop paying you so much. You got all these rich hobbies. And he was taken aback by this guy. He was really angry. And he went home and he stewed and he lay awake that night and he thought, I'm going to show these people. I'm going to work so hard that these people are going to be sorry that they ever made me to feel like I was somehow, special. Even considered selling his boat and all that. But after a while, he was able to let it go, and he said, okay, you know what? This is me. I've taken under advisement, but this is the way I want to go. He said a year or two later, he was talking to the guy, and he said, do you remember when you said this to me? And the guy said, no, I don't remember. It must have been an off day. This guy almost train wrecked his whole ministry and his whole life based on the opinion of a resentful person who 2 years down the road wouldn't even remember saying it. You need to decide who you're going to be. And understand that sometimes where people are coming from, it doesn't mean you have to go there. Second thing, limit exposure to the poison, okay? You need healthy places to go. There are times you need solitude, and you also need connections with people who are going to lift you. And you know who those people are. They're people that encourage you and love you and believe in you and want to see you succeed and all that. And it might be a teacher. It might be your grandma. It might be one friend you have. You need those type of people in your life. In fact, if you are someone who constantly surrounds yourself with resentful people, you have a problem. And the problem is you. If the only kind of people you ever get around are the people that are going to tear you down and make you feel miserable, chances are you somewhere learned that, and now it's only people you're comfortable with, and you would rather hang around people that are going to tear you down and make you feel miserable than people that are going to lift you up and help you. And the truth of the matter is it's more uncomfortable for you to get around people that are going to lift you up and help you because your default is to hang out with resentful people. You have to limit your exposure to the poison. This may be someone that's in your life. You may see them every day, all those kind of things. But you can't consistently live in a resentful person's circle and absorb all that negative emotion. You can't. You should never bear that burden alone. And in fact, it's a responsibility of the resentful person to find happiness on their own. You can't be their human pacifier. What else do I do? Starve the dialogue. You do not have to be part of an argument you weren't invited to. Starve the dialogue. Resentful people will often send barbs out. And sometimes the greatest reaction of the people around them is to not say anything and just ignore it. In fact, sometimes, a resentful person will start to resent that, and you don't agree with me, or you don't love me, or anything like that, and you don't have to engage with that. You don't feel responsible for other people being miserable about the way the world is. You may be able to encourage them or challenge them, but here's the thing: you don't have to engage in every argument you're invited to. In fact, if you do, you're going to live a horrible life. I try to remember what the exact quote it was, but you'll never succeed on the road to life if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks, right? God can do something with you outside the influence of this resentful person. So starve the dialogue. And then be strong in the broken places. Be strong in the broken places. Recognize you need help. And the help we need is not for God to somehow alter the universe and make it absolutely fair. That's in his hands. There will be a time where God will make the universe right. But life isn't fair. And you will experience tragedy and suffering. Here's the thing. You have to learn to face it. You have to learn to overcome suffering. In fact, the greatest thing you do in life might be, or a result of, you facing down whatever dragon it is that wants to destroy you. You'll say, well, I might not win. Hey, I would rather go down fighting a dragon than allow myself to be bitten a little bit by piece by resentment of the little guppies of this world. It is a far greater thing to go down in a ball of flames to a dragon you're trying to confront than it is to allow the mice of this world to nibble you apart. And facing that resentment and facing that pain and facing the unfairness of life and having a good attitude and determining to be grateful and facing it head on will make you a bigger person. In fact, it has been my experience that people have gone through horrific circumstances with a person and then have experienced the healing of God and have confronted it and taken care of it and moved on and forgiven and learned to be around positive people and have gauged God and experienced his salvation, his forgiveness and grace for themselves. They often say, you know what, 10 years later I ran into that person and I couldn't believe how much they had stayed the same and I've changed. They don't have that hold over me quite the same. Ask yourself, what are the benefits? What are the benefits of engaging in resentful behavior? Peter wrote about Jesus. He said, when they hurled insults at Jesus, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to the judge who judges justly. And then Proverbs 11 again, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives. The true fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives. When I was 11 years old, I made a decision to give my life to Jesus Christ. And how I did that was I recognized that being in control of my own destiny and having my own dreams and everything was a world very much wrapped up in me that wasn't going to help. In fact, a lot of times it would hurt those around me. So I made a choice as an 11-year-old. I know, how horrible can an 11-year-old be? Well, it's pretty horrible. I had 4 sisters. I made a choice to serve God. And so what I did is I said a prayer. And I asked Jesus to become the leader of my life or come into my heart and then to forgive my past. You know, probably some of my worst sins at that time were, stealing Smarties from my sister. But at the same time, I recognized I needed something. And I'll never forget, I said that prayer and I accepted Jesus into my heart. And I felt free. And I remember getting up and jumping up and down going, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. There is something to be said for allowing God to have control of our lives, quite literally, to serve him and to dedicate ourselves to a purpose that is greater than ourselves, and to not allow ourselves to go the easy way and become a resentful person. There's so many angry people in this world. Isn't it funny that at the same time that anxiety and depression are up in our world, what else is up? Anger. Anger. You can't go on Twitter, you can't open up the internet, you can't hear the news without hearing a bunch of people screaming, about how horrible things are, and some of them have legitimate beefs. But, here's the thing. If we all hurt those who hurt us, eventually we would all be gone. At some point, we have to embrace gratitude and reject the resentment in our lives. And so I hope we've helped you with that today. God bless. We'll pray. Father, if we are not a follower of Christ, then we say this prayer. Jesus, come into our hearts, forgive our sins. We turn over the direction and the future of our lives. we will begin to serve you. We will join a church. We will pray every day, and we will read the Bible, and we will tell others about you. We commit this to you, and we ask that, God, that you heal the resentment and anger in our own hearts, and then give us the strength to deal with those who are the same around us. Father, we live in a world where we need something. We all need something, and that need is huge, and it can only be filled with you. And so, God, as we are dealing with people that maybe are tearing us down, or we are that person ourselves, give us grace. Help us to go forward, and help us to accept responsibility for what we can control, and to be able to trust you with the things we can't. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless. We'll see you next week.
Was fathers, a stranger with no home, and your kindness waking me from my sleep. Your love, it beckons deeply, a call to come and die. By grace now I will come and take this life. Take your life. Sin has lost its power, and death has lost its sting. It's from the grave you risen, victoriously. It's a marvelous light. I'm running out of darkness and out of shame. By the cross, you are the truth, you are the light, you are the way. My dead heart is now beating, my deepest stains now clean. Your breath fills up my lungs. Now I'm free, now I'm free. Sin has lost its power, and death has lost its sting. It's from the grave you risen, victoriously. It's a marvelous light. I'm running out of darkness and out of shame. By the cross, you are the truth, you are the light, you are the way. It's a marvelous light. I'm running out of darkness and out of shame. By the cross, you are the truth, you are the light, you are the way. Lift my hands and spin around. See the light that I have found. Oh, the marvelous light, the marvelous light. Lift my hands and spin around. See the light that I have found. Oh, the marvelous light, the marvelous light. Sin is lost. Sin has lost its power, and death has lost its sting. And from the grave you risen, victoriously. It's a marvelous light. I'm running out of darkness and out of shame. By the cross, you are the truth, you are the light, you are the way. It's a marvelous light. I'm running out of darkness and out of shame. By the cross, you are the truth, you are the light, you are the way. and see the light that I have found. Oh, the marvelous light, the marvelous light. Lift my hands and spin around, see the light that I have found. Oh, the marvelous light, the marvelous light.
What is it?
It's back.